All right, guys. Today we're going to learn about our fourth method of solving a quadratic, and that is by completing the square. So, one of the types of ways we looked at the equation of a quadratic was what we called vertex form, right? And that's what this is right up top. This is vertex form. And if you remember, we liked it when we were graphing because it has the vertex as numbers as part of the graph, as part of the equation, right? So the vertex here would be -1, -16. So we looked at this format a long time ago. Now, we could actually take an equation in this format and use our technique number 3, square roots, to solve this type of problem, right? Let me show you this. If I took this quadratic, this x plus 1 squared minus 16, and I set it equal to 0, instead of using FOIL to expand out x plus 2, I could move the 16 to the other side, right, which would give me x plus 1 squared equals 16. And then, hey, look, I've got a perfect square, something squared, right? That's what this is. Perfect square equals 16. So how do I solve that? Well, I can take the square root of both sides. Now, what I end up is I have x plus 1, it equals 4, or x plus 1, it equals -4, right? That's that plus or minus 4 from the 16. Well, now I've got my two equations. This would give me x equals 3, and this one, if I take one away from both sides, would give me x equals -5. So 3 and -5. So this is what we're learning about to do today. We can take any quadratic and turn it into vertex form using this technique called completing the square. Right? And this idea is that you take something that doesn't have a perfect square and you put a perfect square into it. All right, so let's look at number 1. I have 7 steps that you're going to take, and that sounds like a lot, but I am literally showing you every single step that we're going to take to complete this square, right? And solve the problem. It's both, actually. We're going to complete the square and solve the problem. So number 1, right, we're going to take all numbers, just all constants, and move them to the right-hand side of the equation. So on number 1, that I have over here, I'm going to take 26, my -26, and I'm going to add it to both sides. So that's step 1. K squared minus 14k. I'm going to leave a space right here. You'll see why in a little bit. I'm going to write something in there. And then -9 and 26, I believe, turns into 17. All right. So now I'm going to make sure that A has a coefficient of 1. Right? And so basically that just means I need to have a 1 up front in order to do this method. And we're going to learn what we can do if it doesn't have a 1 up front in a little bit. But let's just right now make sure it has a 1 up front. So it does. It's got a 1 up front. So I've done that. I'm going to almost use this like a checklist. Now, number 3, I'm going to take the coefficient of the x, or the b term, right? So here, I'm going to take b, and I'm going to divide it by 2. And then, if I kind of combine steps 3 and 4, I'm going to square that number that I just got, and I'm going to add it to both sides. All right, so let's actually do that. So I'm going to take -14, that's my b term. I'm going to divide it by 2. What do I get? I get -7, okay? And then, so that was step 3, done. Step 4, I'm going to square that number. What happens when I square -7? -7 times -7, it's +49. The answer should always be +49. And I'm going to add that to both sides. I'm going to write +49 on both sides because of that 49 that I got there. All right, that's step 4. I'm done. All right, so this side, the left side, I now need to factor. So let's kind of look at this for a second, and you'll get really quick at this. We want two numbers that multiply to 49 and add up to -14, right? I'm going to stick these in my parentheses. I've got my k's up front. What numbers multiply to 49 and add up to -14? Now, I don't know many numbers that multiply to 49 other than 1 of 49 and then 7. And actually, -7 times -7 equals 49. and it adds up to negative 14. All right. Well, negative 7, that's kind of interesting because negative 7 is the number that I got here when I divided b over 2. And that is always going to happen. This number that goes inside these parentheses is always going to be what you got when you did b divided by 2, including its sign. So if it was a positive number, there'll be pluses. And if it was a negative number, there'll be minuses. All right. So I factored the side with a trinomial. And actually over here, I just need to do this math. 17 plus 49, that's 50, 66, I think. Is that what it is? 50, yep, 66, 66, perfect. All right, well, this left side, if it's x minus 7 times x minus 7, that's a perfect square. Sorry, and then it's k, not x. That's k minus 7 squared. So look what we did. We wrote it as a perfect square, just like I was talking about, equals a number. Well, if I know that a perfect square equals a number, I can solve by taking my square roots. That's my last step. I can throw that square root sign on both sides, and I end up with k minus 7 equals positive root 66, and k minus 7 equals negative root 66, right? I have both of them. I have to write them separately now because I have to solve them. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to add 7 to both sides. Now I can't combine my root 66 and my 7 because the 66 is under a root. So I'm actually going to throw that in front. I'm going to say 7 plus root 66. And over here, if I add 7 to both sides as well, this one's going to become 7 minus root 66. And those are my answers. All right, that was kind of a lot. What I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and try number 2, and then I'm going to go ahead and solve number 2. So make sure you pause the video now, try number 2 yourself, see how you're doing. All right, there's my answers for number 2. Hopefully that made sense to you. All right, let's try number 3 together, and then you have 2 more to do by yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add 31 to both sides, get my numbers alone. Now I'm going to take b divided by 2, and I'm going to have to square it. So b is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 1 squared is 1. So that's what I'm going to be adding to both sides here, 1. All right, I'm going to factor the right. Now I can also just use my shortcut. I know that when I divided b divided by 2, I got 1. So these are both have to be 1. And that's going to be 38. All right, these are the same numbers, so I can write them as a perfect square, equals 38. I can take the square root of both sides, and I'm going to get x plus 1 equals positive square root of 38, and x plus 1 equals negative the square root of 38. If I subtract 1 from both sides, I'm going to get negative 1 plus the square root of 38. And over here, I'm going to get negative 1 minus the square root of 38. All right. When you're done with this whole video, I want you to go back and do numbers 4 and 5. All right, so number 6, this is one example. I'm going to do one example for you of what we do when the leading coefficient is not 1. Right, so back up here, step number 2, I said make sure the leading term has a coefficient of 1. Like, that's really important. This only works if you have a leading coefficient of 1. So let's see what happens if we don't. We're still going to do the same first step. We're going to add 58 to both sides. Ooh, I wrote 88, but there you go. So I got 7x squared plus 14x. And over here on the other side, I've got 56, I think. Negative 2 plus 58 is 56. All right, so we do not have a 1 up front. All right. If we don't have a 1 up front, what we're going to do is we're going to divide every term in this by 7. So we're going to divide all of these guys by 7. If I do that, right, now I've got, oh, that's not a 6, that's 8. There you go. Now later on, when you take Algebra 2, you might be asked to factor that out, but right now we're just going to go ahead and do dividing it. All right, everything else is going to stay the same. All the next steps. We're now going to take b, and you see b is no longer 14, it's 2, and that's why we had to do that division. So we're going to take our b divided by 2, and then we're going to square it. So once again, 2 divided by 2, that's 1, and 1 squared is 1. So that's what I'm going to add to both sides. All right, now I'm going to factor. This is x plus 1 times x plus 1. We've done this one just really similarly. Equals 9. And now we're going to write it as x plus 1 squared equals 9. And now we can go ahead and take the square root of both sides. So we get x plus 1 equals 3, and x plus 1 equals negative 3. If I take 1 away, I'm going to get 2. And over here, I'm going to get negative 4. So we got 2 and negative 4. All right. Let's hope that makes sense. All right, so try number 7. Pause the video, do number 7. I'm going to do it out so you can check your answer. All right, now in this one right here, I'm actually going to simplify the square root of 12. Right, let me just think about square root of 12 for a second. It's 4 times 3, so it actually is 2 root 3. So when I rewrite it, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to say 3 plus 2 root 3. And I can't combine the 3 and the 2 because the 2 has to multiply by the root 3. And over here, I'm going to say x equals 3 minus 2 root 3. Once again, same thing. Can't combine the 3 and the 2. Right? I can't actually add those and say it's 5 root 3. That's not the same thing. All right. Hopefully you got the same answer, or at least very close to it, maybe with the root 12s. All right. I'm going to do number 8 for you as well. Same idea. I'm going to add 15 to both sides to get myself 45 over there. And the reason we move that number first before we go and do our division is because the way that we've set up these problems is going to avoid fractions for you. That's the hopeful part for you. All right, so we got 4x equals, and then over here 9. So now we're going to go ahead and take our b value, which is 4 divided by 2, which is 2. And then we're going to square it. So we'll get back 4 plus 4. All right, this becomes x plus 2 times x plus 2. And then over here it's 13. So then that becomes x plus 2 squared equals 13. Let's take the square root of both sides. And we get x plus 2 equals positive root 13, and x plus 2 equals negative root 13. Let's move these 2's to the other side. Oop. There you go. Minus 2, minus 2. And so we get x equals negative 2 plus root 13, and x equals negative 2 minus root 13. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. All right, so you have a few practice problems to do, right? So I want you to practice completing the square on these ones. There are 6 of them. Only 2 of them have A's that aren't 1. So just make sure you pay attention to those. And then for homework, you just have the 10 problems that are below. The first 6, I want you to use completing the square, but the next 4, you can use any method you want. You can try and factor, you can take square roots, you could graph if you really wanted to, you could complete the square, whatever you want. I kind of want to see what you're going to do with that. So hopefully that makes sense.